IB Nation, welcome to the Recruiting Hour here on the Irish Breakdown Podcast, live here on a Friday to preview, of course, Notre Dame, USC this weekend. They have a long list of very impressive visitors in the 2025 class to keep a close eye on. We'll hit that. We'll also hit a mailbag. But we also have a special guest on today, Mr. Brian Smith. Smitty, everyone that watches this podcast, good friend of the show, has been on multiple times. And I reached out to Brian recently because we had talked about this on the show, Brian. I think me and you may have last time you were on here, but Notre Dame in the 2025 class is making quite an impact in the Southeast to begin the 2025 cycle, which we'll get very much into. So we're going to kick it off with 2025 recruiting, specifically in the Southeast. We're going to get Brian's takes on just the state of Notre Dame recruiting in that region and just early buzz on them down south. We'll also talk about some of the great recruits that are coming out of there that Notre Dame already has commitments from in the 2025 class. Second segment, we'll also be hitting on USC Notre Dame. I'll be breaking down the visitor list, who's going to be there, what's at stake, how important it is, and then we'll hit the mailbag. So mailbag questions in the chat, MB before the chat, before the question to make me help me as your host, producer, and everything above to distinguish what is a mailbag question and what is just general chatter in the chat. So, Brian, I really wanted to hit on this, man, because it was funny. I saw a post yesterday, a picture that's going around, and I might put it up on the podcast at some point. No, it's a good picture, man. It's a good picture. All the 2025 Notre Dame commits that are going to be on campus this weekend are tweeting out the picture of the 5 Southeastern players who are now committed to the University of Notre Dame. They were all together at Ohio State. So they took a nice picture before CJ May was even public, before actually it might have been after Daniel Anderson was public, but you know, they had just made obviously the commitments while they were on the visit. But it was CJ May, Daniel Anderson, Justin Thurman, 2025 running back, obviously out of the Florida area, Davion Dixon, defensive tackle out of Miami Palmetto, who was the first commit to Notre Dame in the 2025 class. And of course, Duce Knight, quarterback out of George County and Lucedale, Mississippi. So the first 5 commits, which was funny because Joseph Reif committed a couple days after that. And of course, he's an Illinois kid up here. So he broke the trend, man. First 5 players in the class for Notre Dame. We're not going to count Nate Roberts because he's decommitted. First 5 commits in the class for Notre Dame, all Southeast guys. So I figure, who's a better person to talk about the impact than with you, a person that is down there, that covers the region at such an extensive level. So, Brian, I really want to ask you, because we talk about where Notre Dame needs to pitch their tent in recruiting, right? And we talk about, obviously you need to keep the Illinois kids at home that you want to keep at home, the Indiana kids, you need to pitch a tent in the Midwest players that you want to keep at home. Of course, we've seen Notre Dame hit Texas a lot harder recently over the last couple cycles. We've seen North Carolina in the 2024 class that's been very good to Notre Dame. But Southeast, just in general, we've seen in recent years, Notre Dame has had struggles in spots like Florida. I mean, Notre Dame has a commitment from a quarterback in the 2025 class out of Mississippi. Only one player from the state of Mississippi has committed to the University of Notre Dame, not counting Duce Knight, in the last 26 years. So it's been a long time, right? There hasn't been many guys out of Mississippi that have come to Notre Dame. So I want to ask you, just to start us out here, what do you make of this, man? Such an early run on Southeast for Notre Dame. I think that this was something that was needed, but to see it actualize in person, 2 Florida kids, 1 Alabama kid, an Arkansas, and a Mississippi quarterback, that's pretty big time, man, to start a cycle for Notre Dame.
It is, and I think there's a couple of reasons. This will predate you, but Dave Roberts was at Notre Dame when they were trying to rebound, and Holtz brought him in, and he's a guy that had coached all over the Southeast in the 95 class that was so famous. I had Autry Denson and a bunch of guys, and it's about personalities. He got like 10, 12 guys from the South, including Jarius Jackson from Mississippi, ironically, and it's about the people. And Freeman is loved everywhere. And he's got guys like Gaduli, who's done a good job. If you see anything that Duce puts up, he tags Gaduli. You don't do that. You don't even get him on campus for a visit, let alone a commitment, unless there's a lot of relationships. So that's first. And second, they just had to kind of roll the dice if they're going to do it. I know firsthand, especially with Florida kids, It's the worst. I don't care if you're a Florida State, or Miami. I talk to those coaching staffs in some way, shape, or form, and different people around them. They know it's hard because the kids down here are very fickle. They've just put in more time because it's a shorter road to go to Ohio and Pennsylvania. But how many corners are in Ohio and Pennsylvania that you can get? And how many of them aren't already getting a gazillion offers like Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan because it's a smaller place?
Right.
And the one that was really wild to me was CJ May because I know his school. This is no kidding. The Falk kid that's committed, that's his teammate, his older brother's committed to Auburn, and I met them a couple of years ago. I went through that town. It took about 3 seconds. There's like no cell phone reception around there. Those kinds of areas do not fit Notre Dame at all.
Yeah.
I asked the older Falk, I said, what do you guys do for entertainment? And he said, well, when we get bored, we go ride a bull. I said, excuse me? I mean, it's like, you do what? It's just not a normal culture. So the effort that Notre Dame has put in to get these kids is totally different, man. You got to give them a lot of props.
Well, quick props to myself as well, Brian. Before CJ May visited for the Ohio State game and then decided to commit, Brian asked me, are there any guys that are like under the radar that you think like could pop, like if they have great weeks? And I was like, keep an eye on CJ May. Like there's something there,
Good for you.
He kind of changed his answers to a couple things, right? And it's like seeing the trends of things, right? Because he had originally said, like, I want to finish out junior year, maybe go on official visits, then I'll kind of make a decision, right? Like that's kind of his train of thought. And then all of a sudden, before that visit, he was like, it's just kind of like when I know, I'll know type of situation. I'm like, that means something's coming here, man. Something's coming here soon, right? Something's coming. So yeah, but he was a massive get for Notre Dame. When is the last time Notre Dame got a big-time player out of the state of Alabama?
Justin Tuck.
Right.
I used to call him all the time.
It's almost 30 years ago now, right? It's actually, it is 30 years ago, right? Because wasn't he like 2000?
He was 2001 through 2004.
Yeah.
It's over 20. That's a long time. And he was from one of those little itty-bitty towns, too. It was a one stoplight town.
Yeah. Oh man, which is just wild to think about. I already mentioned the Mississippi conversation. Like they had one defensive back in like 2019 that signed for Mississippi that I don't think ever panned out for Notre Dame. But then Caleb Offord, who I think I saw his name pop up. I think he's like at UMass or something like that now. It's a weird something like that. I don't quote me on that one, but it was something weird like that. But then before that, the last player to commit to Notre Dame from Mississippi was Jarius Jackson in the late 90s, right? So it was Mississippi.
Jay Johnson and him were like
Jay Johnson. Yeah, back-to-back classes, literally back-to-back classes. So you haven't touched Mississippi much over the last 25 years. You get a big-time quarterback that I'll talk to.
That's the funny part, though. It's not just a guy. It's the guy. It's hilarious.
Exactly. Well, in the spot that you're down there, obviously spending a lot of time in Florida and around the Florida schools. I want to ask about the two Florida kids, and not much about them as players yet. We'll get into that in a little bit. But Notre Dame being able to touch Florida twice early on in this 2025 class already with Davion Dixon and Justin Thurman. Notre Dame has had, and I'm sure that you could speak to this, Brian, they've had their struggles in the state of Florida on the recruiting trail, man. Getting two guys this early is pretty substantial, in my opinion. Pretty substantial.
Well, first off, both of them are originally from outside Florida. That helps. But once you get down here, because a lot of people will say so-and-so went to Ole Miss and he's from Florida, or went to Florida State and he's from Florida. About half the kids here have strong ties out of state because it's a transient place, even the Miami kids. So the Chicago, Houston, whatever. But Notre Dame just got in on them early and this is what we do. This is our pitch. And we build relationships. I'll give Marcus credit. You can bitch all you want about a lot of things in college football. His plan for recruiting, every school should. It works. And he makes his guys really just be held accountable. Mario Cristobal is really good with that too. I'll give him a shout out. He's obviously had a bad week, but his staff is really held to a high level with recruiting, and they don't jack around too. And it pays off. Relationships. And they found two kids that are academically inclined, and they can both really play. So it was a good fit all around.
Yeah, and we'll obviously get into them a little bit deeper into the conversation. I wanted to ask Brian because, for me, it's like I'm a New Jersey guy, right? I'm a Northeast guy. So all I hear about buzz all the time is about Notre Dame. Like you hear about it all the time, right? Because
Sure.
up here it's like Penn State, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Michigan. Like that's it, right? Like that's where
It's
like
true.
people in my region really fall to, right? Like there's no Maryland fans around here, right? Like we're all
It is
in
what
that
it
Big
is.
Ten sphere and the Notre Dame sphere.
Sure.
I'm curious for you being down where you are in Florida and being around. I know you spent some time in Texas and there's a couple spots you've been in, but as far as the buzz around Notre Dame recruiting down there from someone that lives in the Southeast, someone that talks to Southeast people, someone that talks to kids that are mostly going to, SEC schools and that type of illustration, what is the buzz around Notre Dame recruiting and the program just in general right now in that sense?
There's two, possibly three, how you want to mix it up, divisions there. Older people, coaches, etc. Most of them, it's one of two categories. I hate them or I love them. It's just like it is with fans. Like the Miami people hate Notre Dame more than any school. And it's not even competitive. And I know a lot of them because I cover Miami. But there's also a weird thing with that. If Notre Dame offers one of those kids because of the degree value and how it boosts a high school program,
Yep.
they may not like Notre Dame. And I mean, really dislike, but they don't mind them recruiting them because it's freaking Notre Dame. So there's that part. The kids are curious because Freeman's a young guy. He's very charismatic and all that. And it's just, most schools don't hire guys like that have the big brand. So obviously right now is a very important time. They need to figure it out on the field to keep the momentum going. But Notre Dame has the attention of kids, even down here, which believe me is extremely difficult with Florida kids in particular. I think it'll be easier long-term. It's what I personally call Notre Dame's future triangle. Charlotte, Atlanta to Nashville, that triangle in that area. I think Notre Dame will do much better than they will long-term there than they will in Florida. But again, if you get a few of the transient Florida kids, you're fine. But they've just gotten more buzz because the effort and the kind of personality that Marcus has. So before he took over and I was down here.
Didn't hear it. Yeah. Didn't hear about him. Well, that's funny that you say about the Charlotte area because obviously Notre Dame has 3 kids from Charlotte just in the 2024 class with Jack Larson and Bryce Young and Mikey Gilbert. Yeah. And we were texting about Mikey Gilbert yesterday, man. He's had a tremendous senior year, which is
he's balling, man.
Yeah.
Notre Dame found him early. Good for them.
Yeah, they did. And they stuck on him even when he wasn't like super interested. They just kept chopping on that one,
That's what I'm saying. They stick with their plan, man, and it works.
Yeah. Well, and Brian, let me ask this because you mentioned something that I think is important to this recruiting conversation that we've talked about a little bit, but I think there's like a deeper conversation we can go here. Is that immediately the short-term outlook has been about what Marcus Freeman's pitch is, who he is as a person, and what he can sell to recruits, right? About what the future of Notre Dame football is. We are entering, though, a little bit of an area here now where it's like, now you need to show that on the field, you can back up what the message has been as far as where you're building. How important is this next few, well, the rest of the season, obviously, but even moving into next year, as far as Notre Dame really needs to now show the on the field can match the charisma off of it, the show, the pitch, all those things can kind of intertwine together.
For Florida kids, it's humongous. Like, I'll put it to you like this. I'll just use Miami's debacle. I was at that game and I left right before it happened so I could beat traffic. I already had the photos I needed. And I'm glad I didn't see that because I probably would have been ejected by the personnel department for that stupidity. But Florida kids, it's not what you've done for me lately. It's the last 5 minutes.
Right.
It's just, I can't explain that to other people. You have to live here. And even some of my buddies like John Garcia is from Miami. He can't explain it to people and he grew up there. So that's going to be a problem. Like if they finish, let's just say 8-4, just to throw a number out, that ain't going to work down here.
No.
It's not. The kids that are from the traditional Deep South, like ironically Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, they look at things more holistically. The degree, like Duce is a different kid. For people that don't know, haven't researched him, he's going to go to Notre Dame and kick it real good in the academic area, and he's going to love the challenge. The Florida kids don't want to hear about that, by and large. They don't. So that's why Notre Dame struggles with traditional Florida kids. But I tell you what, it's at some point you still got to prove, especially offensively. Like if you're a receiver right now, I mean, they already got their. If they're lucky, they're already set there because, like, why would you go?
Right.
I mean, I know they got injuries and stuff, but they're frustrating to watch, and they got a guy that's going to get drafted at quarterback. It's very puzzling. So, I mean, every other position on offense and defense, like the defense has played pretty well, barring a few goofy plays against Louisville. They complete missed on some run gap fits, but I mean, I think they can sell their product in general. It's just the receiver position. They're really lucky that they had already kind of bounced. So will that change in the next class? I don't think it will as much, and it's because of Duce. I'm sure we'll talk about this in a second anyway.
Yep.
And this has been a very, very long time since I've been able to say this about Notre Dame, but Carr has been that way for this class. Yep. And then to get another guy in the next class that's really good and to have that personality too, I'm not sure there's another team in the country in the last 5 years that's had two quarterbacks as good and as charismatic. I mean, not that Marcus and his staff don't get after it, but that matters, man. You need somebody. A quarterback position is just different. You know that. I mean, you played linebacker, but I'm sure if you'd have been a 5-star, you wouldn't have had as much impact as what CJ Carr is. He's quarterback.
Absolutely not.
So that's the deal.
I mean, you even heard it on like Swamp Kings, right? The Florida Gators thing where it's like Brandon Spikes is like, as minute Tim Tebow was going, I was going. You know what I mean? It was like, wow, the linebacker felt like that about a quarterback. You know what I mean? Like that speaks to that. I think to your point is like quarterbacks sell it, man. I mean, and I think I'll get into USC later, the USC game this weekend, but you have CJ Carr and Duce Knight that are both going to be on campus this weekend, which I think is huge for Notre Dame. I mean, 2024, not as much just because 2024 is pretty much done for Notre Dame. Like there might be a surprise here, a surprise there, a kid they're keeping a close eye on, that type of thing. But 2024 class is pretty much done. But having Duce Knight be there now twice for the biggest games of the season for Notre Dame for the 2025 kids, it's huge, man. I mean, I'll say it like this, Brian. I don't think that CJ May has quite committed yet to Notre Dame if Duce Knight is not in this class. I don't think that is. I don't think that you're trending quite as well with Taylon Taylor and a couple of the wide receivers if you don't have Duce Knight in this class. Like that matters. You're 100% correct. It 100% matters. Well, with that though, my last question for you is on the flip side of my previous question about, how much of a, I guess, make or break period it is for, just on-field success. If Notre Dame does have that success, let's say they finish out strong, go 10-2, maybe win a New Year's Six Bowl, but then next year they contend for a national championship, let's say, just theoretically. How big can this brand get down in the Southeast, Notre Dame football, if they can show that they can potentially be that team on the field with the charisma that the coaching staff also brings to the table?
The issues that I just mentioned with the Florida kids flips to the other side. A lot of them are just straight up front runners. They want to go with what's hot. It's just true. Florida State's gotten a lot more buzz in South Florida this year after they had a really strong finish to 22. Coincidence? No. So Florida State's got a lot of pull in South Florida, but they'd had 4 losing seasons. Going 10-3, having a Heisman candidate at quarterback. So, it's not rocket science, man. You need that. And Notre Dame, like ESPN, it's pretty obvious they're not fans. But if they can make money on Notre Dame, what do? They throw them all over their freaking network. It's just true. So that would help. And, Fox and NBC and all the other ones do a pretty good job with it. But it would matter. I think they would end up getting a couple of kids that otherwise probably wouldn't even freaking visit, at least in this state. And then, again, the other part of this, it's unlimited. Duce Knight. There's going to be a 25 receiver that we're not even talking about right now. I guarantee it, that's going to visit. They may or may not get him. That's a top 5 kid just because of Duce. Mark it down.
Yep. Duce already has this nice little list of players that he's really targeting heavy for the 2025 class. Like, yeah, he's that guy, man. You're 100% right. So we're going to get into that. This will kind of wrap up our conversation about the Southeast, Notre Dame's perception, but we're going to get next into the actual commits in the 2025 class for Notre Dame and get Brian's perspective on them. Brian, I think a perfect place to start is, and it would be ill-advised of me not to start with Duce Knight, quarterback, George County, Lucedale, Mississippi. I'm very curious on your perspective because even before Notre Dame landed Duce Knight, they were in that little bit of an area of Notre Dame's fighting with Tennessee for Duce Knight for a couple months there at the end, right? They were fighting back and forth, and then everyone freaked out because he transferred to Lipscomb Academy, and they're like, he transferred to a Tennessee school. He might go to Tennessee. I'm like, guys, just chill out. Let this play out a little bit. It ended up being fine.
That's right.
Even before that, you have been very vocal, both on podcasts before and on the message board, about your thoughts on Duce Knight and just your opinions of him as a football player. My question, just to open up this conversation, how special of a player could Duce Knight potentially be?
He could be the first pick in the draft when it's all said and done. I mean, I know you're a measurables guy because you're an NFL draft guy. The following thing, how they say running game and defense travels. Well, a 41.9-inch vertical as a sophomore in high school, that fucking travels too, buddy. Let's go. I mean, I hate to say it, but like, you can't teach these things. He's unreal. So now can you do all those things in the background with coverage? I mean, he's playing at Lucedale, Mississippi. You got to find it on the map.
Right.
You got to find it on the map. But
if you ask me right now where Lucedale is in the state of Mississippi,
you don't know.
I would not be able to tell you. I wouldn't be able to tell you.
He's a really special talent playing against some good competition. I told you before the podcast, hey man, look, I'm going to probably go see him in a couple weeks. They're playing against a team that's got a couple kids that are committed to Florida. One is a pass rusher who's a dude. If you're going to go, you might as well go when it matters most. And I want to see him be challenged. But there was a play I saw the other day where Duce just hit a kid in the mouth and the kid just went, psh. And I'm like, it's probably not going to happen that way at the Power 5 level very often. But he's a great, great athlete and he can fly, RPO. Like, could you imagine if he would have picked, and I don't agree with him as a coach overall, but a certain coach in LA that Notre Dame's playing this weekend with Duce?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Could you imagine the RPO game with that stuff?
I was thinking about that. I was also thinking about, could you imagine because he was thinking heavily about Tennessee for a little bit there, right?
Yeah,
could you imagine Josh Heupel's offense? Like,
that would have been, I wouldn't have bitched at him. Like, I'm obviously a Notre Dame fan.
Yeah.
But I understand.
Yeah. I mean, you think about what Hendon Hooker did with Tennessee and just kind of multiply talent-wise of what he could potentially be, you know what I mean? Because body types are similar, but it's like, Hendon was going to run a 4.52 and do that type of stuff. You know what I mean? So
Duce is a kid that can run 4.5 on an average day, and he's not even been trained up yet. Imagine what a college football program with the money that Notre Dame, or it could be Texas Tech. It wouldn't even matter.
Right.
His ceiling is so high.
Yep.
Now it's up to him. And again, this is why quarterback is so frustrating with the draft. It's from here to here because the gifts it took about 4 plays for me. I'm guessing about the same for you to watch him. You're like, okay, the motion's natural. He's got an arm. He can run. He can make guys miss.
It was the first play of his sophomore film. He stepped up in the pocket and threw this rope down the middle of the field without his feet set. And I was like, dude, what? Like, there was NFL kids that couldn't make that throw. And I'm like, that is silliness, man. Absolute silliness. I hate lefties too. And I was like, yep, I'm good, man. I don't need to see any more. That's my guy right there. That's him.
Yeah, I'm not saying he's finished, but
he's not nearly finished. Yeah.
Name a kid in his class that has a higher ceiling, of course. I'm not saying he's the best right now. But he's in that category anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I would say right now that, the two best upsides, I guess, are Duce Knight and Bryce Underwood, I guess, right? As far as having that type of upside. I mean, I like the McIntyre kid out of Tennessee, but
he's the sure bet kid. He's been coached.
He's the sure bet. That's a good way to put it. Like his floor is substantially higher than a couple of those guys. Yep. But if Duce touches his ceiling, Duce is a better player. It's just, you're playing the you have to bet on yourself a little bit.
Yeah. I'm hoping that he does, because he's also the kind of kid you root for. I've communicated with him, Wood. I know you have. He's the kind of guy Notre Dame fans would just like in general. Because if he was a student, he'd be fine. He'd be fine if he never played football. He'd be fine right at Notre Dame.
And he's such like an easy kid, right? As far as like he's got like an easy personality. He's
Oh,
very respectful. Like it's just a really good fit, I think, for Notre Dame.
100%.
So yeah, I think as a football player, we see it 100%. I think that as a fit, as a person, as a student, it just all makes sense. So the future for is definitely bright as long as you can develop him. If you can develop him, he can be a superstar on the college level. I have no doubts about that.
100%.
I know you're going to be down probably sometime soon to see CJ May, who, of course, is out of Highland Home in the state of Alabama. You mentioned a little bit. Just early impressions from you, Brian, on what you've seen from CJ May and how big of a get that is for Notre Dame.
He plays in a unique system for what I think he'll eventually do. They have him feather out, drop, a little more multiple, but he's not playing at a big box school. Like if he was
Right.
at one of the Birmingham schools, Clay Chalkville or something, he'd be doing one thing: see quarterback, kill
Get
quarterback,
quarterback.
because they have other guys. They got him doing more than I'd like him to at his high school, but he's got length, he's got speed, he's got the frame, but he's a high upside kid that I don't know how good he is because most of the guys on the field with him one on one are not going to handle CJ.
No,
So
they
I'm
don't.
curious. He's playing more linebacker-ish kind of role, although it's a hybrid.
Yep.
I don't know. I'm curious what you think about that because I'm not picking on their coaching staff. They're probably
Yeah.
doing what's best for them. But for
Yep.
Notre Dame or Auburn or any school that recruited him, that's probably not what they're going to do with him. So it's
Yeah.
interesting.
It is really interesting because I think the Viper position for Notre Dame, the weak side defensive end, there is a lot of that similarities as far as you have to be able to drop at times. You have to be able to work. I mean, like if they're working from a 3-man alignment, there might be some time where he's tucked inside as an inside linebacker at times. Like, so I think the fit makes a lot of sense. But I will agree with you on this sense of like, I've seen his stats and stuff, and he has very good stats because he's just a really good athlete, right? And he's got good length to him and all that type of stuff. But he could be more dominant on the level he is if he was just asked to do one thing. No doubt about it. Because last week he played in a game where they actually played a team that I think was undefeated coming into the game. I forget what team it was, but they won like 60-0. And he had in one half 5 tackles, 2 sacks, a forced fumble, an interception. Like it was just like ridiculous stat line. You know what I mean? Where you're just like, that kid can do a little bit of everything. But on the next level, what does Notre Dame need him to be? And I think that this is the deeper question for me, is that Notre Dame needs to find outside pass rushers. They need to find those guys
100%.
that can really threaten the quarterback. And that's what CJ May needs to be on the next level. So I agree with you in that sense of like, hey, he might be able to be that versatile guy that can play Viper and do this and do that. But I hope, this is my hope, is that Notre Dame's recruiting him to be a pass rusher, to be a quarterback hunter. Like that's what I'm hoping for, man. But I don't know that to be 100% a fact. I mean, it's just, but that kid needs to get after the quarterback, man, because he can get after the quarterback, which is awesome.
100%. Now the question is all the experience he's getting now dropping a little bit? Because Marcus likes that too.
He does.
It makes me weary because, and I know a lot of teams are doing it. I'm hoping that at least helps him transition because that's the harder part. He's actually going to do the easier part at Notre Dame.
Yes, just pin your ears back and go. Yeah, you're 100% correct. Well, and I think that was again, Duce Knight had a big influence on CJ May to get him a part of the class for Notre Dame. There's no doubt about that. But CJ May was trending towards Notre Dame even before Duce committed. I think that just kind of that made everything a little bit quicker, right? As far as like what are we looking at this point, right?
Boom.
So CJ May is a big get. I want to go to the 2 Florida kids that we got here next because I know that you've spent a lot of time. I know you actually had Justin Thurman on your podcast before he even committed to Notre Dame.
Right.
I also had him on the podcast because he's a great kid out of Tampa Jesuit, running back, very, very fast track kid. He can run, and he had a slow start to his junior year. But the last 2 games, I think the 2 games ago, he only carried the ball 3 times, but it was in a blowout. He had 3 carries for 60 yards and a touchdown or 2. And then the last game, he actually had 120-something yards rushing, but 160-something all-purpose, and 2 touchdowns, I think, in that game. So he's really getting going. Your early opinions on Justin Thurman, speedster out of Tampa Jesuit?
Well, 2 parts to this. Number one, I saw him play against Miami Columbus. And unfortunately for Jesuit, their head coach had told me this for the year. They got a really young team, and part of that's up front. They had like 40 linemen or whatever. They didn't get beat by Columbus up front. They got bludgeoned. Like he touched the football and they had 2 guys in his face. I mean, just straight misses. I don't think he had positive yards in the game.
It's wild.
Like, so I kind of wasted my trip there for that and that specific part, but his attitude never changed. He was their kickoff guy. And their other kickoff guy, he led him down the field on a play. They scored a touchdown. Like he's very mature and fit and he can fly. So there's a place for him on the team. I wouldn't be surprised if he was a la Jeff Burris style, ended up being free safety, receiver, whatever. He's very athletic. He can catch well. He can do anything. So I know he's listed as a running back. I list him as a football player now. And I think that he'll find his niche.
Which I think is a big reason. And I'm actually going to talk about this in the USC preview a little bit more thoroughly. But Notre Dame is also bringing in James Simon for a visit this weekend out of Louisiana. And I know most people saw that though, Brian. They're like, don't they already have 2 running backs in the class? But when you have a guy like Justin Thurman, that might be a little bit of a flex type of player potentially, right? Maybe it ends up being, 100%. That's just my opinion. Maybe it ends up being like, say, I don't think they're going to get James Simon, but like say you do get James Simon for whatever reason. If you get James Simon and Daniel Anderson, that's your running backs. And then Thurman gets like maybe the Chris Tyree type of trend of like where he's going to end up, as far as maybe a slot. And yeah, exactly. So, hey man, all I know is a guy like James Simon's a guy that I'm going to keep recruiting because that kid's pretty good, man. Pretty good out of the state of Louisiana. So
yeah, James Simon can play early at LSU, kind of talent, just to put it in perspective. So we're good there.
So he's now gotten off to obviously a much better last couple games. I'm glad to see. Because there were some Notre Dame fans that are like, did you take Justin Thurman too early? And I'm just like, guys, I just think there's a little more context to this, right now. Just let him get rolling a little bit. Oh, it happened a lot. Just let it play out a little bit. Let's see how this season unfolds. And now the last 2 games, obviously he's had very good games. So now it's quieted up a little bit, which has been good to see. Davion Dixon, first commit in the Notre Dame class for Notre Dame. He transferred to Miami Palmetto this offseason. Now he's playing for them. I know I talked to him before last game. He already had like 6 or 7 sacks on the season. So he's having a really good year overall after having a dominating year at his previous school. 6'2", 305 pounds, kind of fits the true nose position at Notre Dame. He's going to be kind of that playmaking nose potentially on the next level. Was a really good get for Notre Dame early on, but your opinion just on Davion Dixon as a fit for Notre Dame?
Personality-wise and what he's looking for, it's the same deal as with Duce. He's a little quieter, won't have any problems off the gridiron. Really robust, big kid. He's starting to figure out his body because he went from like 270, 280 last year. He's gotten a lot bigger. He needs to change his body long term. He'll be a kid in a red shirt, then he'll play. But his strength is very natural. I don't think he's going to come in and like dominate or anything, but he's one of those kids that'll start for a year or 2 at Notre Dame, and he plays the rarest of rare positions. He's a nose guard. You can't teach nose guard. Either you're big enough or you're not. That's
exactly.
It's just, there's no way to say you need to have a big old butt to sit in there and take on guys like that because you're going to get doubled a lot. It's not fun. I would not sign up for that. There's just no way around it. But he's an athletic kid too. So the only problem I have with him right now, it's the same almost with every kid like him. He's been so much bigger and stronger than everybody. Now that everybody's starting to catch up, he's got to take his training and everything to another level. Like he's just been able to go like this and just move everybody out. In the Miami Public League, where he's at, that doesn't work that way. He's at Miami Palmetto. Those are dudes on dudes. There are no free nights in the Miami Public League. So
and I was actually kind of happy to see him make the move over there because I wanted to see him against better competition. It's actually been nice to see that he is still producing at a very high level, which has been great. So he's a dude. So it's because like you said, Brian, like I think that's a great way to put it. It's like Notre Dame for the most part, right? It's like you're not going to have an off week. Like you gotta play here, man. Like you gotta play. You know what I mean? And Dixon is getting tested, and he's been very, very productive so far, which has been great to see. All right, and then last guy of the Southeastern kids that I just want to get your opinion on before I let you get out of here is Daniel Anderson, who's a running back out of Bryant High School in Arkansas. I know that he has been a little bit limited as a junior so far. He's been dealing with a foot injury, but he committed to Notre Dame during the Ohio State game. Actually, before the game even started, he made the public announcement. Bryant High School has won 5 straight state championships in the state of Arkansas.
They're beating the bejesus out of everybody. I don't know what they're doing there, man, but they're doing it right.
they're killing him, man. And he as a sophomore had like 800 something yards, but only like 70 something carries. He averaged like 11 yards a carry as a sophomore or something
That's
like
absurd.
that. So yeah. So I think that he plays on the best team that they play on a week-to-week basis, right? So I think there's some context there. But 5'11", 190 pounds. I don't think he's a burner by any means, but I do think he's a very physical kid. I think he's a very smart kid, and I think he has really good vision to him. So very interesting addition to Notre Dame, in my opinion.
If I was to compare him, I won't say the person's name, but a hint, he was at Notre Dame and now starts for LSU at running back. That's the style I would put.
Yeah, I can see that one. Yeah.
And
Logan Diggs is a good one. You know who I compared him to as well? He reminded me a little bit, maybe not quite as good in the passing game, but you remember Darius Walker and kind of how he ran? Like he wasn't super explosive. Didn't have the greatest straight line speed of all time, but like very crafty runner. Like he just kind of found lanes, and found cutbacks, and he was a really good runner. That's kind of who I see.
The thing that I'm curious about with Anderson is he's, like you said, he's not a burner, but he's only a junior in high school. I want to see his foot speed on senior film before I really grade him, because he'll hit the right crease. He's a physical kid, and he, God blessed him with a good frame. If he goes up that extra tick with his first step speed and some open, then it's a whole different ball game.
Agreed.
So that's the thing. He's got to get faster. He's got to get faster.
Yeah, because I think that's a difference, right? It's like right now I look at him and I say that's a good running back on the college level, right? But the differentiator would be if that burst does come, if that second gear does come,
then it's a different deal. Yeah.
Completely different conversation. So that's Daniel Anderson. Again, we kind of hit on everybody that's committed to Notre Dame in the Southeast. Got Brian's opinion on just kind of Notre Dame's trend in that area of the country right now, which I think is it's huge. We talked about it a little bit, but Notre Dame's going to get some guys from the Midwest. Obviously, they're going to get some Texas kids. They're going to get some North Carolina kids, but digging a little bit deeper at times and getting those types of players, I think it potentially be huge. Brian, I know you're kind of moving around and working through everything, man, but I thank you so much for joining the show today. Great. I know everyone always loves to have you on the podcast and everything. Thank you so much for joining the Irish Breakdown podcast today, man. I look forward to having you back on very soon. If Notre Dame can get a couple more SEC kids, man, keep bringing them in, and we can keep rolling this thing.
Yeah, I have a feeling that there'll be a wide receiver or two that's going to visit from down here now that Duce is in the fold. Just remember I said that.
I love it. Love it. Brian, thank you so much, man. Have a great rest of your day, okay?
Do the same, buddy.
All right, folks. It was Brian Smith giving us some great context into the Southeast in the 2025 class for Notre Dame right now. Make sure you go follow him on Twitter as well. He's at Football Scout Florida. If you guys want to go take a look at his work that he does down there, he does obviously tremendous evaluations of the Florida kids, Southeastern kids. Hope you guys really enjoy that conversation. Next, I'm going to get into the preview of the Notre Dame USC game from a recruiting perspective. We're also going to get into mailbag questions in a bit as well. So make sure that you hit the mailbag questions in the chat. We got a bunch. We got a couple super chats as well already in the chat. So make sure that you are all throwing in those mailbag questions in the chat at any time. But we're going to get into the USC Notre Dame preview next from the recruiting perspective. Before we do, if you could just hit that like button for me, subscribe to the podcast, notification bell. Make sure that you are subscribed everywhere on any and all of your favorite podcast platforms. 5-star reviews are also very much always appreciated. As always, go Irish here on the Notre Dame Recruiting Hour here on the Irish Breakdown Podcast. All right, folks. So we talked about this before the Notre Dame Ohio State game. That was the biggest recruiting weekend of the year, or the season, I should say. The second biggest recruiting weekend of the season is Notre Dame versus USC this Saturday night, 7:30 Eastern time. There is a long list of very talented players that are going to be on campus. If you all are not yet, you should go to boards.irishbreakdown.com, because I'm telling you this for a fact. We've had the majority of this visitor list already finalized weeks in advance. So you would have known some of these guys were already coming to campus a couple weeks ago. So you can go on boards.irishbreakdown.com as a premium subscriber and see that visitor list as we get confirmation of players that are going to be visiting for each and every home game. Also, I am going to have a piece most likely on Sunday, maybe Monday, depending on how much intel I can get over the weekend, on how these visits went for these Notre Dame targets that are going to be on campus. So Any and all intel that I receive this weekend will be made available to the premium message board members. And now that we are doing Friday recruiting shows, you all are not going to get this intel until next Friday. So boards.irishbreakdown.com is the place to go. You're going to get the recruiting updates on the site from the free perspective. But if you want the premium stuff, the intel, the early indication of how visits went, who's trending where, how we're feeling about players coming out of the visit, who's being a great recruiter for Notre Dame on the recruiting trail, all that little intel stuff, boards.irishbreakdown.com is the place to go. But I will share now, as we are working through, you're going to hear every visitor that is expected on campus for Notre Dame this weekend, every single one, because now we're only a day away from the game officially kicking off. There's going to be some of these visitors that are already on their way to Notre Dame that'll be arriving later tonight, some tomorrow morning, and spending the weekend in South Bend, Indiana. So I want to break this up offensively and defensively, okay? And we'll work through all these different players. Offensively, we'll start there. There are, and just from a recruiting commit perspective, the players that are expected on campus for Notre Dame, because commits being on campus is always huge for Notre Dame and always huge for any other school, because you're there to build relationships and have a great time and enjoy the game, all that stuff. But also you're a big recruiter. You help with the recruiting side of things as well. So 2024 class, you should expect quarterback CJ Carr, running back Kedron Young, running back Aeneas Williams, wide receivers Cam Williams, Micah Gilbert, and Logan Saldate, tight end Jack Larson, offensive tackle Styles Prescott, and offensive lineman Anthony Knapp on campus. As well in the 2025 class, Duce Knight, quarterback out of Lucedale, Mississippi, and running back Justin Thurman. They will all be on campus this weekend as Notre Dame commits. The key targets that will be on the board, and I'm going to work this from going from running back down to offensive lineman. There's some really important players for Notre Dame in the 2025 class. First, making his first visit to campus ever, 2025 Shreveport, Louisiana Calvary Baptist Academy running back James Simon, who is considered a consensus 4-star recruit in the 2025 class. I hit on him with Brian Smith a little bit, but because most people say, why is James Simon visiting when right now Notre Dame already has 2 commitments in the 2025 class from running backs with Daniel Anderson and Justin Thurman? Well, one, I think one point, and this is my opinion, I think James Simon's just too good not to keep recruiting. He's that type of football player, in my opinion. He's one of the better running backs in the entire class. He's really, really good football player. Also, as Brian hit on, Justin Thurman might be able to do some other things on the football field. Maybe he could play defense, but you definitely can get the ball in his hands as a pass receiver, has the big time speed. Maybe he could be a flex player. Maybe you can recruit him as an athlete instead of a running back position. Again, that's speculation on my part, but there's a reason that you're bringing James Simon on campus, right? There's a reason for that. First visit ever, Shreveport, Louisiana kid. So obviously schools like LSU and some of the SEC powers are very high on James Simon and are recruiting him heavily. I will say this, though, and I've said this on the message board before and on this podcast, I believe, as well. James Simon says a lot of great things about Notre Dame, folks, and he has for several months. He was offered during the Pot of Gold offer event on St. Patrick's Day this year. And since then, he has kept in consistent contact with Notre Dame, and Notre Dame has really kind of sold the vision to him. And he has legitimate interest in the University of Notre Dame. Now, I'm not here to say they're a leader or anything like that. I think it's way too early because James Simon is not rushing anything. He is after junior year, after official visit type of decision maker. That's it on his timeline right now. But I will be very honest about this. 2 to 3 weeks ago, I would have found it very unlikely that James Simon would have even visited Notre Dame. But Notre Dame was able to get him on campus this weekend, and they're able to get a visit from him. So I'm interested to see where this thing goes. But Notre Dame has been putting work in on James Simon. So we'll see if they're able to really impress him this weekend. Again, first time ever in South Bend. If they have a great visit, if they have a great victory, maybe that moves the needle where you're in that top group that maybe you can kind of try to ride some momentum. But either way, getting James Simon to campus was a big time achievement by Notre Dame. And I think that they deserve a lot of credit for just getting him to make that visit. That's big time in my opinion. Wide receivers. There is 3 wide receivers that I wanted to hit on that will be coming to campus this weekend. One is Jerome Bettis Jr., who's out of Atlanta, Georgia, Woodward Academy. Of course, the son of former Notre Dame great running back Jerome Bettis. He will be making, I don't even know how many visits he's been to campus, guys. Like, he's been in the last year, he's probably been 5 or 6 times to Notre Dame, but obviously he's a legacy recruit. So he's been to Notre Dame countless times in his lifetime. This isn't a new thing for him. He knows South Bend, Indiana. And he's starting to blow up on the recruiting trail a little bit. I was looking for 947. Yeah, probably, Brandon. I mean, you're probably lowballing it, to be honest, man. He's probably been to campus. I honestly couldn't even imagine how many times he's been to campus in his lifetime. It's probably something ridiculous. But Jerome Bettis Jr., who is actually developing a good offer list. I remember when he was offered by Notre Dame originally, a lot of people were like, oh, this is just kind of a throwaway offer because he's legacy. But he has been getting some nice, decent push on the recruiting trail now. He now has offers, and I'm pulling up the list as we speak here. He has offers now from Notre Dame, Georgia Tech, Arkansas, UCF, Boston College, Missouri, Texas A&M, NC State, Duke, Purdue. So he's got a nice list of offers now at this point on his offer list. So it's been very interesting to see as he's kind of developed. He went from Westminster School to Woodward Academy as a junior. And right now he's pulling in a decent offer list. I will say it like this. I think Notre Dame has been in a great spot with Jerome Bettis Jr. for a long time. I actually had a recent update on the premium message board, and also will be live on the show on the site as well. I would say for me personally, Jerome Bettis Jr., Notre Dame is still the leader easily for me. But he is planning on not making a decision until after junior year. So he's letting it work itself out, and he's just not rushing the decision right now. I think if he had this pick at school today, it would be Notre Dame, and I think it would be Notre Dame pretty convincingly. But right now, he's not in a rush to make that decision as of right now. But, things can always change. But that was in the recent update where that was just kind of his timeline update for me. So Jerome Bettis Jr. heading to South Bend this weekend. As is, for the first time in over a year, Kobe Howard, who's out of Davie, Florida Western. I should have asked Brian Smith about him when I had him on the podcast. But this is a young man he's had a fascinating backstory. So he was a dominant freshman a few years ago. He's now a junior. A couple years ago, he was a dominant freshman. And then sophomore year, he had a catastrophic knee injury early in the year, which cost him the entirety of the season. And that kind of put recruiting on hold a little bit for a minute there. There were some schools that were just kind of, let's see how he comes back from that injury, and let's just kind of ease in. Notre Dame actually kept decent conversation with him through that, though. Like, they didn't just go ghost on Kobe Howard through that. But there was a little bit of a break in the communication recently, but it just started picking back up about a week and a half ago. And now he is coming for the Notre Dame USC game for the first time in over a year, it's going to be interesting. I'm just more interested to see because he is now fully healthy, and he's played in 3 games so far as a junior in 2023. And he's been very good, folks. He's averaging well over 100 yards a game, over 300 yards in 3 games. He just had a $120 and 8 receptions against someone really good. I think it was St. Thomas Aquinas. No, American Heritage. He just had 8 catches for 120-something yards against American Heritage. So he's had a really good start to his junior year for when he's been available so far for Western. And I'm just curious to see how he likes the return visit to Notre Dame because he's been there before. He knows the expectation. But just a little bit of a break, obviously, with the momentum. Interested to see what comes of it for this week for Kobe Howard. The last wide receiver in the 2025 class that we're expecting on campus is Dalen McCutcheon, who's out of Lucas, Texas Lovejoy, which is the same high school as Peyton Pierce in the 2024 class that Notre Dame recruited at linebacker for a while, that's now committed to Ohio State. This young man has now been to campus. This will be his second time. He visited this offseason after being offered during the Pot of Gold. He is really impressive talent, both from he's more of a field wide receiver. I think he can play in the slot, and I think he can play outside, from the field perspective as a Z. This kid is a really smooth, short area explosive kid who understands spacing. He understands how to attack leverage points. He's a really good route runner for his age as well. I like Dalen McCutcheon a lot. I think Dalen McCutcheon's pretty high on Notre Dame. I would call them probably a top 3 to 4 school for him right now. And getting him back on campus has a chance to continue that momentum. Obviously, you have to, because there's a lot of schools that are after Dalen McCutcheon, the Texas schools, some SEC schools. But Notre Dame, I think, is going to have a chance there if they choose to push for Dalen McCutcheon. I think they'll have a chance in the end. It's just going to be about being consistent, because he's another kid that he's in no rush. He kind of leaves it up to, I'll make a decision when it feels right. But there is kind of still a hard timeline, as wanting to take visits and wanting to drop a top 11 schools at some point. Now, he just doesn't want to rush the decision. So, but Dalen McCutcheon getting back on campus for the second time is very good, because he's now in the state of Texas. We've talked about this for, in the 2023 class especially, and then 2024 also. There's been some luck there. Notre Dame touching the state of Texas is big time. 4 kids in the 2023 class, 2 kids in Kedron Young and Leonard Moore in the 2024 class. Keep getting kids out of the state of Texas, and Dalen McCutcheon could be the next. We shall see. We have a tight end who is also a legacy recruit for Notre Dame, James Flanagan, who's out of Green Bay, Wisconsin, Notre Dame Academy. His father obviously was Jim Flanagan, played with Notre Dame at defensive tackle in the golden era of Notre Dame football. Actually, I think he may have played defensive end, but he's a defensive lineman for Notre Dame, Jim Flanagan. And his son, James, is one of the more interesting athletes in the 2025 class at tight end, especially. He is obviously 6'6", 230 pounds, plays tight ends, plays out wide a little bit, also plays on the defense side of the football, is a really good linebacker for the team. I think he was an all-region linebacker as a sophomore. And he also is a big track and field athlete from a throwing perspective. He's over a 50-foot shot putter, and he's a 170-plus foot discus thrower as well. This kid's an explosive athlete. He's a really talented kid. Notre Dame's in a great spot. I think for a while it was a Notre Dame-Wisconsin battle. I think Notre Dame has separated themselves among the Big Ten schools, the Midwest schools. I think Michigan's decently high on his list as well. But I think Notre Dame it's kind of separated themselves at this point. It's just about, can you now close the deal on James and make him want to make the plunge and make that decision? I think Notre Dame has a good chance to potentially do that this week. But, it's going to come down to how great that visit goes, which I think they have an opportunity to do. Couple offensive linemen I wanted to hit on, and then there was another kid that doesn't have an offer yet from Notre Dame that I'm just interested in. I just want to talk about for a minute. But offensive tackle, probably the biggest target on the board, both literally and factually, is Owen Strebig out of Waukesha, Wisconsin Catholic Memorial, same high school as Corey Smith in the 2024 class that Notre Dame recruited, that is committed to Penn State. Owen Strebig, 6'8", 290 pounds. This will be his 5th visit to campus at Notre Dame since being offered. He actually wasn't even offered at the Pot of Gold offer event. He was offered like a week or 2 after that by the staff. But since then, Notre Dame has been trending in a tremendous direction with Owen Strebig. 5 visits is great proof of that. There are obviously a couple of the Midwest schools that are high on Owen Strebig as well, and that he has high on his list. But right now, I would again say, if you ask me today, who is the leader for Owen Strebig, I would say it's Notre Dame. I would say it's pretty convincingly. Another kid, and you see a theme here, that wants to let the process play out after junior year, after official visits, make a decision. I would be interested, though, and I'll just leave this here, if that gets moved up a little bit at some point. I'm not saying it will. I'm not saying it won't. I'm just interested to see if there's any change in that timeline, because there hasn't been yet. But, I mean, it's hard to imagine someone's in a better position than Notre Dame right now for Owen. We saw a lot of offensive linemen in the 2025 class get off, or I shouldn't say a lot, a couple offensive linemen that camped at Notre Dame this offseason that eventually got offers. I think of guys like Rowan Byrne. I think of guys like Will Black. I think of guys like Matty Augustine. Another guy that camped at Notre Dame this offseason that got offered in late September was Easton Ware, who's out of Lynchburg, Virginia, Liberty Christian Academy, which is the same high school as Gideon Davidson, who Notre Dame was high on, that committed to Clemson in the 2025 class. This will be Easton's second visit to campus, obviously the first time being when he camped at Notre Dame. And everything seems to be trending in a good direction here. I'm interested to see where they value Easton Ware on the board, because it's a pretty deep offensive line board overall for Notre Dame right now. A lot of really talented players. But there's been a weird kind of vibe in the Rowan Byrne recruitment. You know, he was supposed to visit for Ohio State, then he canceled, went to Penn State, isn't coming back this season. And right during kind of that chaos, Easton Ware was offered by Notre Dame. So I'm curious if there's like a little bit of a maybe shuffling of the board as far as who are the guys that Notre Dame is really going to push for. And that's just speculation on my part. But Easton Ware seems to be a kid that Notre Dame is keeping very close ties on and deep communication with. So we'll see where things come from this visit. But obviously Notre Dame is pushing the right buttons with Easton Ware since offering him in late September. 2025 tight end that is going to be on campus that I think everyone should just keep their eyes on. I had a little bit of I'm going to have an article about him either today or tomorrow, but I also had his name on the message board. Very interesting kid. Goodland, Kansas High School tight end, Lincoln Cure, 6'6", 220 pounds. He is blowing up, folks, on the recruiting trail. I was writing down his offer list last night, and it is pretty wild to look at right now. I'm pulling it up so I don't miss any of the biggest offers that he has. But this offseason, he's gotten pretty much every offer he has because he barely did much as a sophomore. This year, as a junior, in like 6 games, he has like 780 receiving yards or something like that and like double-digit touchdowns. He's been tremendous as a junior. But so far, he has now offers. And these are all of these offers. Again, just hear me when I'm selling this. All these offers came during this offseason. So, during this season. So over the last couple of months, these came. Auburn, Florida, Iowa, Iowa State, Kansas, Kansas State, Michigan, Missouri, Nebraska, Oklahoma State, Oregon, Penn State, Purdue, Texas A&M, Vanderbilt, Wisconsin, Colorado, among others. They have all offered Lincoln Cure. Notre Dame has not. But coming into this visit, there has been a lot of conversation with Lincoln. The staff has been talking to him a ton over the last few weeks. An offer has not been extended yet, but don't be shocked if Lincoln Cure leaves this weekend with an offer from the University of Notre Dame. Because even if Notre Dame gets James Flanagan, which still feel very good about, there's still a need for a second tight end in 2025 if you don't get a second one in 2024. So if you don't get that one, there's still a need for another tight end, the second guy in the 2025 class. Could it be Lincoln Cure? Not sure. But one thing that I'll say is that I talked about this in a different show where people asked about, are they recruiting AJIA and Ryan Gee and some of these other tight ends on the board? And the answer was yes. Like, they are still talking to those kids. But I did say, and you can quote me on this, I said this on a podcast, that they are, I think that after James Flanagan, there's going to be a little bit of a push to add some new names to the tight end board in 2025. And I think Lincoln Cure could be one of those guys that gets added to this tight end board quickly because he's blowing up on the recruiting trail, a player that they've been talking to a lot over the last couple of weeks, and a player that I like. I watched his film and I was like, he's mostly a wide receiver right now because he's 6'6", 220 pounds. So like, you don't see him block too much. But man, my guy is long and athletic, and that works. That plays in today's world. So Lincoln Cure, just keep an eye on him on the offensive side of the football for Notre Dame for maybe getting an offer this weekend. I'm going to move over to the defensive side of the ball now real quick. The recruits that are expected on campus that are committed to the University of Notre Dame in the 2025 class, in the 2024 class, and then one 2025 player. Bryce Young in the 2024 class, defensive end Logan Thomas, linebackers, Kingston Viliamo Asa back to campus this weekend, as well as Teddy Rizak out of Omaha, Nebraska West Side. Safeties, Bronte Johnson and Kennedy Urlacher are also expected on campus. Carson Hobbs wanted to get on campus, but unfortunately, he has actually played in St. Edward, which is Logan Thomas's school, but he's not sure if he's going to be able to make the trip just because of travel and all that type of stuff. So 2025 class, CJ May, who I hit on with Brian Smith a little bit earlier in the podcast, out of Highland Home in the state of Alabama, will also be on campus this weekend out of commits. I'm going to get into the defensive targets here. Again, really want to just push this out for everyone, for anyone that's listening. Mailbag at the end of this. So mailbag questions, just throw them in the chat. MB before the question, or mailbag before the question, just so I know what a mailbag question is. But we'll get there after the defensive targets are going to be on campus. One of them is an in-state player. Indianapolis, Indiana, Warren Central defensive end Damian Shanklin is going to be on campus. He was just offered early in August, so he hasn't been on the board a ton for a very long time. 6'4", 230 pounds. He's a raw kid, but he's incredibly twitched up and very athletic. He is rated as a 4-star recruit by at least one platform now, and he's had a really nice junior season so far. So a kid that Notre Dame is keeping close eyes on, obviously, him being an in-state product, being a local product. Very interesting football player is Damian Shanklin. And, Notre Dame, I think, he's starting to blow up in the recruiting trail a little bit. He's starting to get some nice offers on his offer list. But Notre Dame right now, the plan, or what we could potentially see happening, is Notre Dame already has a strong side defensive end commit in Joseph Reif in the 2025 class. They also have CJ May as the Viper in the class. But I think Notre Dame is open to two more defensive ends, potentially. At least one more, but I think two more potentially. One Viper and one strong side defensive end. So Damian Shanklin certainly fits the mold of a Viper. So we'll see if things develop quickly with that one. As well as another Viper that'll be on campus, Austin Alexander, who's out of Burlington, Kentucky, Cooper, 6'3", 240 pounds. Also Viper that maybe could be a strong side end eventually, but definitely a Viper early on in his career. He's the nephew of Sean Alexander, former Seattle Seahawks great, Alabama Crimson Tide great running back. Really interesting backstory on him. So he actually visited Notre Dame as a sophomore and then didn't really hear much from Notre Dame for like the next year. But then he came to the Tennessee State game after being offered by Notre Dame. They actually reached out to him, offered him, and that relationship has now been increasing over the last few weeks. So he visited for Tennessee State. Now he's going to be back for USC. I think that one's going in a great direction for Notre Dame right now. They just need to keep on that one because you lost a little bit of time with him, obviously, because you weren't recruiting him. And now you need to kind of make up for lost time. But if they are, I think they have a good chance to eventually seal the deal with a guy like Austin Alexander. But it's going to be about being consistent from here on out, which no reason to think that it won't be because it has certainly been since he's been offered. A player that might fit in as a Viper, but also listed as a linebacker, Dominic Hulak, who is out of Elmhurst, Illinois, Immaculate Conception, who is going to be now back on campus for, I believe, the third time over the last 3 months. 6'3", 232 pounds, listed as a linebacker, plays linebacker for Immaculate Conception, but also viewed at Notre Dame because he actually camped at Notre Dame this offseason as well. They put him down at defensive end a little bit as well. So I think the versatility is kind of a big sell for Dominic Hulak. He's obviously a local kid. We'll see if he's a guy that Notre Dame pushes for tremendously, but he certainly likes Notre Dame right now. But we'll see, obviously, if that fit makes sense long-term as far as both sides wanting to be a part of the Irish. But he is back on campus again, and that versatility is obviously a big sell for why Notre Dame likes him. Linebackers. There's actually two linebackers on campus that I am juiced about, folks. One is Noah McHale, who's out of Laverne, California, Bonita High School. He was offered by Notre Dame last November, so November of 2022, when he was only a sophomore in high school. And at that point, he called Notre Dame his dream school. Called him his dream school straight up. And then he visited Notre Dame a couple months after that. And then there was a little bit of a break as far as the momentum. There was just a lot of this is one that it's just there's a lot of competition for him. I mean, Alabama, Georgia, all the SEC schools, all the Pacific schools. Like there's just a lot of people coming after Noah McHale. But Notre Dame has a chance to get him back on campus and to start building that momentum back a little bit. That's just it's not a fault of Notre Dame, in my opinion. Notre Dame has been consistently in contact with Noah McHale. It's just you're playing against the heavy hitters for Noah McHale. So you have to be able to withstand the ups and downs to fight through it and eventually get him obviously on campus. So you have Noah McHale coming back, as well as Brett Clatterbaugh, who's out of Culpeper, Virginia, Eastern View. He's been on Notre Dame once before already. He'll be back again. And so he speaks very highly of Notre Dame. Again, linebacker recruiting is an interesting one because I actually think there's a few players on the linebacker board that Notre Dame's in a pretty good spot with. But if you ask me today, like who are the three guys that are the biggest pushes or the biggest priorities on the board, can't really answer that for you. I mean, like I think Anthony Sackham probably fits into that distinction. I think Noah McHale probably fits in that distinction. But I think there's a few linebackers that Notre Dame would be very happy with. And I think Brett Clatterbaugh would be one of those guys, man. He's a dang good football player. So he's heading back to Notre Dame, which is a great sign for Notre Dame football. Actually three corners, very talented corners that'll be on campus for Notre Dame this weekend. One that I already talked about with, I almost said something I wasn't supposed to say, but I talked with him about with Brian Smith before I started, but Cree Thomas out of Phoenix, Arizona, Brophy Prep, which of course is the same high school as Benjamin Morrison. Cree also was pretty close with Benjamin Morrison for the year that he played in high school with him at Brophy. Notre Dame's in a great spot with Cree Thomas. Cree has been consistent over the last few months that when he knows, he'll make a decision and he will take the plunge of making a commitment. I think that Notre Dame has been the assumed front runner for some time now. Along with Wisconsin is probably the other school that I would say is probably the biggest threat to Notre Dame. I truly believe that if Notre Dame has a big visit this weekend, you could potentially seal the deal. Again, not saying he'll commit this weekend, but I'm saying that you really start turning those wheels toward a commitment sometime, hopefully in the near future, because he's a player that Notre Dame really likes. I know he really likes Notre Dame as well. So I think they have a chance to really impress Cree Thomas out of Brophy Prep in the state of Arizona. Other corner that will be on campus is Charles Bell, CJ Bell out of Oakdale, Connecticut, St. Thomas More. Camped at Notre Dame this offseason. Got an offer from Notre Dame with how he performed on campus. He will be back again this weekend as well. A player that they've been keeping in close contact with, as well as Kevin Humes out of Baltimore, Maryland, St. Francis Academy. They have two fantastic corners with Blake Woodby and Kevin Humes. Kevin Humes has been very more open to Notre Dame, and is actually his second visit to Notre Dame. He visited this offseason as well. Very receptive to the Fighting Irish. I think Notre Dame has a shot there, but they just need to kind of just keep being consistent with him. Keep being consistent, because I wouldn't say they're the front runner for Kevin Humes, but I would say they're in that group with Kevin Humes as far as schools that are standing out to him as of today. So Notre Dame has, with Charles Bell, with Cree Thomas, with Kevin Humes, that cornerback group on campus this weekend is very good, man. And talk about on top of Dallas Golden, that's also going to be on campus this weekend for Notre Dame. It's a good place to be for cornerback recruiting in the 2025 class right now. Good place to be. Safety in the 2025 class that's going to be on campus. And one of the top targets for Notre Dame overall, Trey McNutt out of Cleveland, Ohio, Shaker Heights, 6 foot, 180 pounds. Depending on which site you look at, listed as a corner, listed as an athlete, listed as a safety, because he can pretty much do anything he wants on the defensive backfield. He can play nickel, he can play outside corner, he can play safety. Notre Dame likes him as a safety. Chris O'Leary has been the main point of contact, which obviously shows that. And he will be making his third trip to campus in Notre Dame. I think Ohio State is the team to beat de facto for Trey McNutt. I think it's going to be a hard pull away from Ohio State. But third trip to Notre Dame, which tells you there's interest there, folks, right? Like there is legitimate interest there from Trey McNutt, which I think is a great sign for Notre Dame. So keep getting him back to campus, buddy. Keep getting him back to campus, and maybe you have a chance at the end. Maybe you have a chance. But Trey McNutt, big-time player. I mentioned Dallas Golden briefly there as well. He obviously out of the state of Florida, same high school as Keon Keeley, who was committed to Notre Dame in the 2023 class, and obviously ended up decommitting and committing to the University of Alabama. Notre Dame has been on. They've been on Dallas Golden for a while now. They offered him as a sophomore, so multiple trips now back to campus for Dallas Golden as well. We'll see if Notre Dame can continue to move the needle for him. So, folks, that is all the players that you need to know about that will be on campus this weekend at the University of Notre Dame for their battle against USC. We're going to move over to the mailbag next. Keep getting mailbag questions in the chat. Got a bunch already started. Really going to hit into some great questions, great content as always. Want to thank everybody again for just listening to a little bit of this breakdown. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the podcast, notification bell at the bottom of the screen. Also go to boards.irishbreakdown.com and sign up for the premium message board, as well as if you are listening to me on one of your favorite podcast platforms, 5-star reviews are always very much appreciated. Thanks, y'all. We're going to move to the mailbag next. Mailbag time. Let's get it going, folks. Let's get it going. I just want to say this before we start. Just want to say this right now, okay? I know this week's been tough, right? After the Louisville loss, I'll be very honest with everybody. I was suffering there for a couple of days. I'm like, oh my gosh. I felt like this pit in my stomach. I'm just like, ugh, Notre Dame football right now. Like, what am I doing, right? But the closer I get to USC, the more excited I get. Because even if Notre Dame doesn't have the record that you would want or not playing up to the caliber that you would want in certain spots, I hate Southern Cal, man. I hate those guys. I want Notre Dame to score 50 on them. And I know I picked Notre Dame to lose this game just because I have to be a honest analyst, but I hope they cream USC. I hope they cream a man. Can't stand those dudes, Southern California. So get excited, folks. Get excited because regardless, we'll be there tomorrow night after the game for the post-game show. Talk about whatever we need to talk about, right? Whether that's a big victory, a big loss, or anything in between. We'll be there, man. It's a great thing about this channel. We're always there through the best of times and through the worst of times. We will be there. We will be there. So be sure to tap in tomorrow, folks, for the post-game show. It's going to be fun. To start us off on the mailbag, we had a super chat. We had a super chat. Did I say something inappropriate? I don't know what happened. Trash with a super chat. Thank you so much. I hope after the season, all the Notre Dame haters who claim we don't play anyone and we get to schedule however we want, shut up. Love you guys. Thank you. Trash, we love you too, man. We love you too. Yeah, I will say this, the scheduling thing, and I get it, Brandon. I was just reading your message in the chat. I totally get it, man. Totally get it. I'm there with you, sir, in a lot of the same instances. I am there. Trash, but I think that the whole Notre Dame doesn't play anything is just like always been the go-to for people that are like conference people, right? It's like, oh, join a conference. It's like, we play probably a tougher schedule than you do because we actually schedule nationally and schedule, we don't have to worry about staying in the conference and playing some shitty lower end conference teams. Like Notre Dame doesn't have to do that, obviously, right? I mean, if like is a University of Michigan fan going to talk to me about playing a tough schedule because they're in the Big Ten? Give me a break, man. Give me an absolute break. But you're right. I hope that stuff stops because it's just so tiring, man. It's so tiring. Same thing as the people of like Notre Dame needs to join a conference. Blah 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 blah. I'm just like, no, they don't. They need to. If they eventually have to join a conference, then they will join a conference at that point. But right now, they don't have to join a conference. They don't have to. For what reason? For what? What do they get out of it? To play their bingo chip early and get less money than they would get if they let the process play out a little bit? Like, no, they don't have to do that. And you also take away the uniqueness of Notre Dame, being able to recruit nationally, being able to play nationally. Like, it's just silly. It's just absolutely silly, that vantage point, in my opinion. I really think it is. But, Trash, you are correct. I hope that viewpoint stops because I think it's tired, and I think it's pretty lazy. I think it's pretty lazy as well. We had a chat from Robert Matichek said, "Our quarterback commits as alarmed as fans are if an offense struggles, particularly when it's led by a proven veteran quarterback who might not be allowed to audible in problematic situations. Many thanks." It's a fascinating question, Robert. I will say it like this. I don't believe that recruits, I definitely don't think recruits jump to conclusions or are as impulsive as fans are. I don't. I've talked to a lot. I mean, I'll give you an example like this. Jeremiah Love, who is now a star freshman for Notre Dame, top player in the 2023 recruiting class. What two visits did Jeremiah Love take for game day visits last year? Does anyone know? Before he made his commitment, he went to Cal, and then he went to Stanford. The Cal game was an ugly victory. The Stanford game was hideous. Both those games, Notre Dame really couldn't do much running the ball. Like, they ran the ball okay down the stretch against Cal in the second half, but the first half they got destroyed. And Stanford, they could not run the ball a lick. And my thought process would be like, why would Jeremiah Love want to come do this? Because a lot of Notre Dame commits and players that seriously considering Notre Dame have a deeper vantage point than just, can I produce on the fields? Because like that matters, obviously. It's a part of it. That's a part of the equation. But it's not the full equation. I think Brian Smith said it when he was on, that like for some demographic of kids, that might be what matters most. Like he mentioned Florida. It's like if the kids aren't playing like if the team's not winning, we're not looking at you type of thing, right? So like for some kids, sure, that can matter. But for a kid that's already committed to Notre Dame, I don't think it sends off the alarm bells as much as it does for fans and for outside noise. I really don't. I think that they understand that there's a process that's involved and that there's a full vantage point of going to Notre Dame. You're not going to Notre Dame just based upon on-field production. You're going to Notre Dame to be challenged, right? A 4 for 40, academically, networking. There's a big pool in Notre Dame other than just what the on-field production is currently. And then I also think that, and I'll use CJ Card and Duce Knight as an example, right? I think that players that are confident football players, which I know both those guys are, and this is more just an overall arching like prospect player perspective. I think most players look at a situation sometimes and say like, I'm the missing link, right? Like I could be the guy that makes that total difference. So I think that combination with the fact that I just don't think players are quite as impulsive, it's not usually as much of an issue as you would think. Usually the only thing that really makes commits like freak out from a Notre Dame perspective or just from a full scope perspective is like coach leaves, firings, that type of thing. On-field production, I think most guys think that like, I'm going to fix that. I'm going to be a part of the fix that's going to fix that problem. So I just don't think that it's a major issue. But can it have a impact? Sure. But I just don't think it's like number one all the time is kind of my point. So hopefully that makes sense. But yeah, it's kind of just my opinion on it. All right. Brandon Plesner says, Ryan, I had a $10 super chat yesterday that never got read. I was charged for it, but I'm not sure if it was ever popped up. New question. Do you expect Carter Nelson to visit? Well, Brandon, first and foremost, man, message me or Brian. Let us know what the super chat was so we can at least answer your question for you, man. I'm sorry that happens. I wasn't on the show yesterday. So actually, I was on the show yesterday. Huh. What was your question, Brandon? I don't remember that. I'm not allowed to look at the chat sometimes because I get distracted. So I actually don't know what your question was, man. But I'm sorry that it wasn't answered. But let me know. Let Brian know. And we can at least answer for you. New question. Do you expect Carter Nelson to visit? So Carter Nelson's obviously 2024 tight end at Ainsworth, Nebraska. Brandon, I'll put it like this, man. Notre Dame has been keeping in contact with Carter Nelson, and they've been trying to get him back on campus, right? I don't know if that's going to happen. I have my doubts on just overall on the whole recruitment of it. But if they're able to get him back, I think it would be revolutionary or substantial. right? Like getting him back on campus would be big. So we'll see. I haven't heard anything one way or the other, but I know Notre Dame's working on trying to get him back, not even necessarily for this week, but just in general. So we'll see what happens, man. It's just, you need to figure it out soon, though, because, I mean, you only have a few more home games left, right? There's not many more opportunities to get a guy like Corey Nelson back on campus, so you need to figure it out. Right, and then we had Backup. What's up, Backup? Backup says, sorry, and yes, Joe, sorry, I just saw a comment in the chat. He did commit to Nebraska, and he is still committed to Nebraska, Carter Nelson, but Notre Dame is still recruiting him, so we'll see what happens. Backup says, will there be any Notre Dame representation at Mater Dei versus Bosco, St. John Bosco tonight? Not that I'm aware of, Backup. I mean, I it's always possible, I guess, but like not that I'm aware of. I know like Kingston Viliamoasa, for instance, like he's going to become a Notre Dame after the game or tomorrow. So he'll be on campus this weekend as well. So I don't necessarily expect it, but that is going to be a massive game, folks. Like I had that in my my preview this week talking about that, but there's been like some fun media stuff about the St. John Bosco and Mater Dei as far as like how much they hate each other, which is pretty dope. But yeah, it's gonna be a really good football game though. It was, got it, Brandon. Sorry. I'll pull that up in a second then. I'll put that up in a second so that you get your super chat worth. My bad, man. My bad on that. But it's going to be a really good football game. Last year, Mater Dei and St. John Bosco actually played twice. The only loss that St. John Bosco had in the 2022 season where they won a state championship and a national championship was against Mater Dei. And then they had a rematch with them in the playoffs, and they won. So both teams had one win last year, which was pretty dope. So I'm excited to see what this year's product looks like, because there's a lot of dudes, man. I mean, the linebackers for St. John Bosco, Kingston, obviously, Lockhart, House. They have a young junior quarterback, I think, named Christopher Sanchez that's been playing pretty good football. They got Marcellus Williams on the defensive side of the ball, a corner that's a really good football player. Mater Dei has a just ridiculous amount of talent. The Frazier kid at running back, Jordan Davidson at running back. They have Elijah Brown that's going to Stanford at quarterback. Their defensive backs, Chuck McDonald and all those guys. It's a crazy amount of talent, man. Crazy amount of talent. So Backup's follow-up question is how many of these dudes on the field have Notre Dame offers? It's a great question. So let me think. So they had an offer to Jordan Davidson, the running back in Mater Dei. They didn't offer, well, let me just stay on the offensive side of the ball. They didn't offer Elijah Brown. Brandon Baker was offered at offensive tackle for Mater Dei. So Brandon Baker, Jordan Davidson. On defense, they have offers to Dixon, the corner. They have offered to Chuck McDonald, obviously. They've offered to Nasir Wyatt. They've been offered to Abdul Sanders at linebacker. 2024 class, they also have an offer to the defensive tackle, whose name's escaping me for some reason, but he's a really good football player as well. Why is his name escaping me? He's trending towards Georgia, but for some reason his name is not popping in my head because there's too much information in my head. I'm just too smart. Yeah, but that's that on that side of the ball. For St. John Bosco, Notre Dame has offers obviously to Kingston. They offered House, the other linebacker. They offered Jason Mitchell, who's playing, I think, safety for them and some wide receiver. They had an offer to Marcellus Williams. So the long answer to the short answer is a lot of players in the 2024 class. So yeah, or 2024 and 2025 class. And let me just verify something real quick before. Yeah, they did, Brandon. They offered Jordan Davidson. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. You say they did offer Jordan. Yeah, I mentioned Jordan Davidson. They offered him as well. Aiden Breland is the defensive tackle, by the way, that is trending towards Georgia for Mater Dei. He is the guy that I was thinking of. So there's a lot. There's probably about 15. And yeah, it's pretty crazy. Pretty crazy number, man. Pretty crazy number. We had another question from Jimmy James. He said, thoughts on Sean Sevillano this season? Can't recall stats like that from a defensive tackle. Low-level competition. What am I missing? Sean Sevillano's having a great year, and it's actually not low-level competition. He actually is playing better competition than what he played as a junior. I think he has 42 tackles for loss and 8 sacks or 9 sacks so far in the season. He's having a crazy year so far, Jimmy. So the thing with Sean is that I don't think he has a ton of upside necessarily because he lacks length a little bit. I don't think he's the greatest athlete of all time. But I think for the role, he's going to be a good player for Notre Dame on the next level. Like, he is a physical, tough nose tackle who I think can also slip a gap occasionally, make a play. So some of the things that he's super successful for on the high school level, I don't think are incredibly translatable to the next level, but he plays hard, man, and he's a good football player. Like, he is. I just think that people, unfortunately, they compare him to, like, their mind goes to his spot was supposed to be Justin Scott, right? It's supposed to be Justin Scott. And he's not Justin Scott. He's not. And when that's basically your replacement, and then also the Owen Wayfield situation happens, then you just kind of like, you need more than that, right? So now they're fighting to get like Nandi Agboko in the class, and they're kind of looking around for some other interior defensive linemen. So it's just been kind of a weird interior defensive line class in 2024. Edge is very good. I mean, Bryce Young is having a great year. Logan Thomas is having a really good year. Cole Mullins is hurt, but he's a good football player. So they're recruiting edge really well. The interior defensive line just has a little bit of issues, I think. But Sevillano's a good football player. I like him. He's having a dang good year, man. Super, super productive. All right. And, sorry. Let me answer this one before I move on. Zach Gehring says, does he have a Howard Cross type ceiling? I wouldn't say Howard Cross. I think they're very different football players. Howard Cross is exceptionally quick, and he could really split gaps. I think that he is more a Jamion Franklin type of player for Duke. You know, that was at Notre Dame there, as far as like the best that he can be. That, or like a Kurt Heinisch-ish type of player. Like, I think he's going to be a really good football player for Notre Dame, but I don't necessarily think he's going to be flashy. I don't think it's going to be a lot of, impact plays. I think it's just going to be good player. Joe Medina also said, I'm liking Notre Dame's start in the 2025 class. I agree. Notre Dame's off to a great start in 2025. All right, so let's now go to next questions from our resident Ohio State fan. Archer452 says, who are some guys that keep an eye on Notre Dame might like to expand the board? Who is a low-ranked guy having a great senior year that Notre Dame might push for? Archer, I'm assuming you mean in the 2024 class, or are you talking about the 2025 class? If you're in the chat, just let me know if you're talking about 2024, 2025. 2024, there's just not a ton of spots left. I think I can tell you positions that I think Notre Dame's going to keep an eye open for, if that makes sense. So, like, let's go there for 2024. Nandi Agboko at interior defensive lines player they're looking at. I wouldn't be shocked if they take a look at a couple more defensive linemen, just interior guys. I really don't think that there's let me just see if that was you that just said so. Yes, 2024. So Archer, there's not a ton in 2024 that I mean, like, there's guys that are taking big steps as seniors, but Notre Dame hasn't kept a ton of spots open in 2024. So, like, interior defensive lineman, I mentioned, like Nandi Agboko, that's committed to Georgia, is a guy that they're trying to work on, obviously. I wouldn't be surprised if they work on a couple more kids there. Names I can't really put out in the universe, but, like, we'll talk about that when we get there, potentially. We'll see. Tight end, we've talked about Carter Nelson. I think it's Carter Nelson or bust at tight end for Notre Dame right now. Like, if they're able to get him on campus and maybe try to flip him, that's great. If not, I think they'll just settle with Jack Larson and then go for 2 tight ends in 2025. I think that's the course of action potentially. Other than that, it's like cornerback with Caleb Beasley. You keep an eye on, but just not a ton of spots left. Tommy, if I missed the mailbag, it's because I ignored your mailbag. So there's a difference there, man. There's a difference. Yeah, but 2024, just not a ton of spots left for Notre Dame. So, but a couple guys to keep an eye out for sure. Chris W., I should have popped this one up earlier, but he said, "Where's the tailgate tomorrow?" Brian put out a message on the podcast yesterday, and I don't know if he put it on the message board, but he probably will at some point. But there's no tailgate tomorrow just because of obviously the weather. So potential of rain and the storm and winds and all that type of stuff. So keep an eye out because I think he said Pitt, but don't quote me on that. I think he said that in a couple weeks he might do the Pitt as a tailgate instead, but there's no tailgate for the USC game this weekend. No tailgate. All right, so let me bring up a couple more. Joe Allen says, with Father Jenkins and Jack Swarbrick both leaving by the end of the year, do you think that there will be a big change in academic standards for the athletics for recruiting? No, I don't think there'll be a big change in the athletics standards. I think the athletic standards are always going to be the standards. If you lower the standards, I think that it changes kind of the viewpoint of Notre Dame football, to be honest. I think that's always going to be something intact, Joe. The one thing, though, that I hope that does change is that for the next wave of administrators, just a little more like help for coaches on that side. And obviously we're talking about Marcus Freeman in the football program, but like a little bit more support is what I'm looking for, right? I'm not looking for a change of academic standards. I'm looking for more support for your head coach on the recruiting side of things, on the hiring side of things. That's all I want. That's all I want. I don't want them to change the academic standards because I actually think that's one thing that makes Notre Dame special. I don't want them to change that. I don't. We had another chat here from Jacob Hayden who said, not a question, but just got to the 41.5-inch vertical, and I love Brian Smith. Yes. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to text Brian Driscoll after this and be like, hey, Brian Smith cursed at one point. I don't know if that's going to demonetize us or not, but I hope not. But but he's right to be excited about that, Jacob. I mean, imagine this again. Duce Knight at 6'5", 6'4.5", 6'5", 198 pounds, 200 pounds right around, 4.53 verified 40, electric time, by the way, and a 41.5-inch verts. It's a good athlete, guys. Good athlete, right? I mean, so if you can develop Duce Knight with the arm strength he has or the talent he has, he could be a special football player. So yeah, Brian got a little overexcited. Hopefully that doesn't demonetize us, but see what happens. I don't know. But it was he was spirited about it though, wasn't he? He was very excited about Duce Knight, which I get it. I totally get it. We had another question from John Yes. He said, with pressing need to develop quarterbacks, wide receivers, etc., what is your opinion on the staff's ability to develop the incoming players? Johnny, that's a great question. It's one that's a little bit still up in the air, right? Because I think that we have too much recency bias sometimes because you look at just what is happening right now, but I have to remember that development is a over years process. It's not over a few months of a process. Like Gino Guidugli, I have all the trust that Gino Guidugli is going to be able to develop quarterbacks. All the trust. Because I've literally seen him do it at other places and make guys look a lot better than they really were, in my opinion. I mean, Desmond Ridder, I think, was a good college quarterback. I think he made him look like a great college quarterback a lot. They had another kid that Ben Bryant, who looked good under Gino. And then when Gino's not there, he just doesn't look like a very good quarterback. And I think he transferred to Northwestern now or something like that. But I think that Gino has done a really good job developing quarterbacks over the years. I trust him to develop the quarterbacks coming in. Wide receivers is still a question mark, right? Because I think this is the track record of Chancey right now, Chancey Stuckey. Chancey went to Baylor, took a bad wide receiver group and made it pretty good in a year. It was good. I mean, literally he got the one kid drafted by the New England Patriots in the second round, Thornton. So like he did a really good job at Baylor. Comes to Notre Dame. I think they improved, but now you're kind of seeing a little bit of mixed results, obviously, this year. And injuries are part of it, but wide receiver just hasn't been in a position that it needs to be developed better. But Chancey Stuckey's also only been a receiver coach in college football for 3 years, guys. Like, that's only it. And he's only been at Notre Dame for 2 years now. And it's not even a full 2 years. It's a year and a half of a season, right? So I just want to give him a little bit more time. But I would be lying if I didn't say that there was some hesitation in wide receiver development right now for me. Quarterback, no. I think that Gino's going to do a very good job. But we'll see. I mean, 2024 is going to be a great indication of just how good of a quarterback coach he is, because you're going to potentially have a redshirt freshman, redshirt sophomore, or a true freshman as a starting quarterback, potentially, unless you bring in someone obviously in the transfer portal. But so those guys are going to have to be ready, man. They're going to have to be ready. And Gino's going to earn his money this offseason potentially. So we shall see. Archer452 said, when do you expect the 2025 class to start stacking commits? In other words, when in the recruiting cycle do you expect the class to really fill out? Well, I mean, Archer, it's happening a little bit. I mean, you had 4 guys pretty much in a very short amount of span, near the Ohio State game, right? Sorry, I'm just marking down a question. But I think to answer your question, I think that there could be some positive movement after this weekend at USC that you could get a little bit of a bump. And I think this offseason, I think that you're going to get a ton, right? Like, I think, I don't know exactly what month, but like there's going to be a nice run sometime probably in April, May, somewhere in that ballpark. But I think that you're going to get a nice little run after USC as well. Not saying everyone will go public right away, but I think that there's a couple of guys that I could see potentially pulling the trigger this weekend if it goes really well. So I think you'll start filling out, and you already have 6 in the class. So I think Notre Dame's going to be heading in the right direction here. Brandon's question, that was a super chat yesterday that he just wanted to put out there, said it was a comment about my lack of confidence in the staff's offensive philosophy and Marcus Freeman continuing that trend because he wants to keep Caleb Williams off the field. Yeah, Brandon, I mean, I have a little bit of the same concern for tomorrow. I do. I think that Notre Dame needs to come out and be aggressive and just kind of let things rip a little bit and then see what happens when it happens, right? Your defense has played pretty well. Like, I would rather them just play their game offensively, try to be aggressive, and then let the defense just do their game and be themselves. But I do have some reservations and I do have some concerns that Notre Dame is just going to try to play keep away the whole time, which in theory I understand. But I think that we've seen Notre Dame's offense be slow and methodical and not very creative. And I think that viewpoint is a big reason for that, right? So I think I hope that is not a reality, but I think anyone would be fooling themselves if they just said, no, not worried about it. Notre Dame is just going to let it rip and we're going to be good. No, I have a little bit of worries that it's going to be a little bit of a reserved type of feel offensively tomorrow, but I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. Ben Tarnowski says, any news on Caleb Beasley potentially flipping? Where do we stand on Bradley Shaw? Are we continuing to recruit Elijah Rushing with his decommitments? And Tommy, my middle name is not John, so I don't know where Ryan John Roberts came from, but that is not my middle name, sir. It's not my middle name. I promise you. Ben, so let's break this down. Thanks for coming, Joe. Joe Allen, appreciate you, sir. Any news on Caleb Beasley potentially flipping? Let's start with that one. Look, Notre Dame's been trying to get him back on campus. He hasn't made a return visit. He's not expected back for USC. Originally, Ohio State was supposed to be the one. You're running out of time with Caleb Beasley. I don't think it's going to happen ultimately. I just don't have a good feeling about that one. So I'm going to say it's very low as far as the probability that happens. Where do we stand on Bradley Shaw? Notre Dame stopped recruiting Bradley Shaw several months ago after they got Kingston Viliamoasa. That one was dead. Notre Dame is good at linebacker in the 2024 class. Excuse me. Kingston Viliamoasa, Bodie Cahoon, Teddy Rizak. That is their team. My name is also not Charles. Ryan Charles Roberts is also very much incorrect. Very much. Yeah. So sorry. Tommy's getting me distracted in the chat, but Notre Dame is not recruiting Bradley Shaw anymore. Elijah Rushing. I think that Elijah Rushing made a decommitment because he knows where he's going. And I'll put it there. And Notre Dame will not be that place unless something very weird happens. But yeah, I think Elijah Rushing knows where he's going to eventually play his football. So yeah, that one's not going to happen. Also wrong, Tommy. Also wrong. You're bad at guessing. Joe Medina says Vince and Brian Driscoll began a feud over who's the biggest Notre Dame fan and decided to settle. Difference within the confines of a steel cage. Who you got? My money's on Vince. He will scratch, bite, whatever it takes. Man, Joe, that's a crazy scenario that you built up there. 2, I think it could go either way. Because I'm thinking about it, right? Vince is scrappy, got like that Italian thing going on, right? So like He'll bite a guy's arm. I think he'll knock him in the ribs a couple times. Like he'll be a little dirty of a fighter. I think. So I think he'll be scrappy, but I also think that he is a smart person, right, Vince? So he'll be like, but Brian runs this site and I make money, right? So like, am I going to hurt the hand that feeds me? I'm not going to beat the hand that feeds me. So I actually think that Vince will end up just kind of playing dead, like possum a little bit, and just like letting it happen, and pretend that he's knocked out. And then, so I think Brian will end up winning because Vince will second guess it and be like, "Nah, man, I'm not going to lose out on a paycheck. Like, I can't do this, man. Can't do this." So, yeah, I say Vince, but Vince tactically makes that decision to not do it. So that's my name. That's my. Also no, Tommy, you're so bad at guessing, man. Like you're really, really bad. So you have not even gotten close yet. Corey says, are we in danger of losing momentum on the recruiting trail due to the poor season, losing current commits and future prospects? 2024, I think Notre Dame will be fine. I think 2025, it's big to have Duce in the class as well. I think that will help momentum and break any lack of momentum due to that, Corey. But I will say this is that if you have a bad season this year, you are putting a lot of pressure on yourself for 2024 to be that season, right? So you're lessening your margin for error on the recruiting side from a on-field perspective. I will say that I think it would potentially hurt 2025 and 2026 a lot more than it hurt 2024. I think Notre Dame goes 8-4, 9-3. I don't think that they're going to lose a ton of recruits. I don't. But if they do that and then they start off a little bit slow in 2024, then maybe some 2025 and 2026 kids are like, I don't know about that one, man. I don't know about that one. So I think long term it hurts a lot more than the short term of 2024. All right. We had Ghost X with a couple questions. He said, what do you think it will take Notre Dame to elevate the skill position recruiting to the elite level? Do we need a success story in the NFL to achieve this? I mean, the NFL is a part of the conversation, Ghost. I think that there's a full scale approach that you need to take in the recruiting side to really get it to an elite level. I think Notre Dame's recruiting at a much higher level, which is good, right? Like quarterback recruiting has been very good. I mean, going from Kenny Minchie to CJ Carr to Duce Knight, like that's good, folks. It's really good. Running back recruiting has been very good. Wide receiver recruiting has been good, very good at times, but the development I think could stunt it, right? So I think the next step of like year to year, just continuing to pump out these classes or better, it's going to be about like, man, you got to show that you can tangibly turn it on the field and then turn it to the NFL. Like that's the next step, right? The development factor I think is big time. So that's the next step for me, in my opinion, is that you need to show now you're getting a lot of talented players. Now you need to make the best of them. And then that'll, I think, continue to sell and then could potentially take it to a next level if you're able to show that you can develop those types of football players. That's where I'm at with that. All right, we only have a couple questions left. If you have any more late super questions, just throw them in the chat, folks. Ghost X also said, do you think the administration allows coaches to pursue undergraduate transfers anytime in the near future, especially considering the current state of the transfer portal? So, Ghost, we talked about this before, but so Notre Dame can target transfers of like kids that are like coming off their freshman year, for instance, like lower end, because they're still they're taking some of those early classes that are a lot more easily transferable than like, some of the higher level classes when they get into their legitimate coursework. So they can still take undergraduates. I think it's the tough part is like when we're talking about like kids that are maybe like third year into a school, not graduated, like, because then it's just so hard to get everything to transfer over. It's just very difficult. So I think it's going to stay the same for now. Hopefully there's a little bit of a leeway that happens at some point to like make that a little bit easier, a little bit more attainable. But I think it's going to be mostly, you're going to see graduate transfers be the mainstay of what Notre Dame is going to recruit, and maybe some kids that are just barely into the course workload type of thing. So I don't think there's much middle ground right now, but I hope that it happens. But if you're asking me, do I think it will happen? Probably not. Probably not. But we'll see. Hopefully. All right. We had a couple more left here. All right. This one's from Rob M, who says, what's the incentive for Midwestern wide receivers and D linemen to pick Notre Dame over Ohio State? I mean, wide receiver, not a ton, unless. I mean, why would I pick Notre Dame over Ohio State? One, if I'm a wide receiver, well, this is just a general recruiting and vantage point is like I talked about this already, but there's some recruits that care a lot more than just the development on the field, right? They care about the development as a person, development as a student, the 4 for 40, the diploma, the networking. Like, so there's going to be some kids that are just care more about just one side of the coin, Rob, in my opinion. There's going to be a lot of kids like that, actually. But if you're saying in a vacuum, why would I, if I was a wide receiver, would I pick Ohio State over Notre Dame? Yeah, I would, because in a vacuum, Ohio State is much better for producing wide receivers than Notre Dame. There's no doubt about it. Defensive linemen, I think it's a little bit of the same, right? Ohio State hasn't. I mean, Ohio State has the Bosa's and Chase Young and stuff, but like over the last couple of years, like it hasn't been tremendous at developing defensive linemen. Like I like Tyreek Williams, but like he might be a third round pick. Like he's not like a first rounder. So I think that stuff's a little bit oversold to a degree, but I think that is the point that you're trying to get to, in my opinion, is that like you need to show why you should pick Notre Dame over Ohio State on the field. And right now they have trouble doing that. So it's more of, you need to find the kids like Cam Williams, for instance, right? Why did Cam Williams pick Notre Dame? Is because everything, right? Everything, not just one thing, right? And there's going to be wide receivers like that. I mean, Cam Williams is now a 5-star on the industry ranking, so he's a legitimate dude. But you need to be able to show on-field production at some point to make it easier on yourself. I think that's the easiness is kind of the thing that I keep pointing towards. All right. I think we have. I get it, Corey. I get it. I just saw your follow-up about keeping small offensive players. I completely get that. I think that 2024 will be just fine, though. Like, I don't see Cam Williams going anywhere. I don't see CJ Carr going anywhere. I think you'll be okay. Well, this is the last question, unless a couple more pop in here. Archer452 said, putting your fan hat on for a second, who is your favorite player on this year's Notre Dame team, and who is your favorite commit in the 2024 class? Oh, I like these questions. I like them a lot. Favorite player on Notre Dame's team right now? I think there's two guys that really pop to my mind quickly. One is Jeremiah Love. That kid's just different, man. He's different. He's just a different cat. I love watching him run. He runs physically. He's explosive. He can catch the football. I really love watching Jeremiah Love play as a football player. He's really, really good. I think the other, though, is Howard Cross. Howard Cross is probably my favorite football player on the defense right now. Just because, like, I'm a sucker for those stories, right? And the stories of, like, he's gotten every bit out of the ounce of his ability, man. Every bit of it. I mean, he's one of the best interior defensive linemen in college football this year, and he is 6 foot, maybe 280 pounds, maybe. He's not a big guy, but he really, really plays the game the right way. He's a baller, man. I love watching that kid play. I really do. He understands what he's good at, and he understands what he can't get away with, So Howard Cross, and I saw someone put him in a first-round mock draft recently. Guys, he's not going in the first round. He's not. He doesn't have quite that talent level to go in the first round. He doesn't. Maybe he's definitely draftable now. Sure. But Howard Cross is an overachiever. He is. Good talents. Not a great talent, though. But he is playing above his talent level right now because that kid is tough. He's relentless. I love Howard Cross, man. He's my guy right now on top of Jeremiah Love. I love watching those kids play. Love them. Well, I think that's going to do it for today's podcast. I'm looking for more questions, and I don't see a ton. All right. Yeah, that's going to do it. So, folks, real quick before you go, I talked a lot today about the 2025 class and Florida's, the Southeast impact in it so far, Southeast implications. So make sure, and we talked about that with Brian Smith. So make sure you go back, listen to that part of the podcast. If you're missing the USC Notre Dame preview for the recruits that are expected on campus, make sure you go back and listen to that as well. And then we hit the mailbag here at the end. Before you go, if you could just hit that like button for me, subscribe to the podcast, notification bell at the bottom of the screen if you're listening to me on YouTube. Also, boards.irishbreakdown.com. I'll be having a big intel piece on the recruits on campus this weekend, probably on Sunday or not very early on Monday. So make sure you sign up at boards.irishbreakdown.com. We'll also have some more recruiting and team intel, obviously, stuff on just irishbreakdown.com, some of the free content that we put out as well. Also, if you're listening to me on your favorite podcast platform, 5-star reviews are very much appreciated. Tell them that Ryan's the best hire they've ever made at irishbreakdown.com. I would very much appreciate that. Go Irish. See you all tomorrow on the post-game show. Thank you so much, though, again, Ryan Roberts. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Recruiting Hour on the Irish Breakdown podcast.